The plasma cannon screamed across the valley as Commander Zethka pressed his scale back against the rocky outcrop. His breathing apparatus wheezed with each labored breath, the filters clogged with the acrid smoke that filled the air. Around him, the remnants of his once mighty fleet lay scattered like broken toys across the alien landscape. Status report. He hissed into his communication device, his serpentine tongue flicking out to taste the fear in the air. 30% casualties, Commander, came the crackling response from his second-in-command. The Vorthak have us pinned from the North Ridge. The Crystalline Empire controls the southern passes. And those damned Nexari swarm ships keep diving at us from above. Zethka's yellow eyes narrowed as he surveyed the tactical nightmare they found themselves in. 3 weeks ago, his hegemony fleet had been the hunters, chasing down what they believed to be easy prey through this remote star system. The small human colony on the third planet had seemed like a perfect target for their expansion campaign. Soft mammals with no significant military presence, according to their intelligence reports. How wrong they had been. The humans had not only fought back with unexpected ferocity, but they had somehow managed to send distress signals that brought 3 other major galactic powers converging on this system. Now, instead of being the predators, the hegemony forces found themselves trapped in a 4-way battle royale with nowhere to run. A massive explosion rocked the ground nearby, sending chunks of alien stone flying through the air. Zethka ducked instinctively as a Vorthak siege beam carved a glowing trench just meters from his position. The bear-like aliens had brought their heavy artillery, and they were not showing any mercy. "Commander!" The voice belonged to Captain Morthek, one of his most trusted officers. The younger hegemony warrior slithered quickly across the broken ground, his dark scales providing camouflage against the volcanic rock. "The humans have barricaded themselves in their settlement. They're not participating in the main battle anymore. Smart mammals, Zetka muteret. Let the others tear each other apart while they wait for rescue." But even as he said it, something nagged at him. The humans had been far too organized, too prepared for what should have been a surprise attack. Their initial resistance had been fierce and coordinated, suggesting military training that went far beyond what a simple agricultural colony should possess. Another barrage of crystalline shards whistled overhead, the Crystalline Empire's signature weapon creating a deadly rain of razor-sharp projectiles. Their insectoid enemies chittered with what passed for laughter as the shards found their mark among a squad of Vorthak soldiers. The bear aliens roared in pain and fury, returning fire with their plasma cannons. Meanwhile, high above the chaos, the Nexari swarm ships continued their relentless diving attacks. The bird-like aliens moved with perfect coordination, their sleek vessels swooping down to strafe enemy positions before climbing back into the blood-red sky. Their energy weapons left glowing scars across the battlefield. Zethka had commanded fleets for over 2 decades, but he had never seen a situation quite like this. For different species, each with their own tactical doctrines and technologies, locked in a desperate struggle for survival on an alien world. The irony was not lost on him that they had all come here for the same reason, to claim this system and eliminate the human presence. "Sir, incoming transmission," his communications officer announced. "It's from the Vorthak commander." Zethka activated his personal communicator, and the gruff voice of Commander Brutus filled his audio receptors. The Vorthak's natural growl made every word sound like a threat. "Serpent," Brutus snarled, "your position is untenable. Surrender now, and we might let some of your clutch live." Before Zethka could respond, another voice cut through the channel. The crystalline tones of Hive Mind designate 7742 of the Crystalline Empire. Flesh creatures debate while the collective calculates victory probabilities. All organic resistance is futile. Submit to crystallization. A fourth voice joined the channel. The melodic but harsh cries of Talon Commander Screef of the Nexari. Skyhunters need no alliance with ground crawlers. All will fall before the Stormwing. The 4-way argument that erupted was exactly what Zethka had expected. Each species was convinced of their own superiority, each unwilling to consider any form of cooperation. He cut the transmission and turned his attention back to the immediate tactical situation. His forces were dug in around what had once been a landing zone for supply ships. The area provided some cover, but they were rapidly running out of ammunition and supplies. To the north, the Vorthak had established a firebase on the high ground, their heavy weapons commanding most of the valley. To the south, the Crystalline Empire had created what they called a growth node, a bizarre organic structure that spawned their warrior forms at an alarming rate. And above them all, the Nexari maintained air superiority with their superior speed and maneuverability. Commander, Captain Morthek approached again, his voice tight with concern. Long-range sensors are detecting something unusual. Multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. Zethka's head snapped up. What kind of contacts? Unknown configuration, sir. They're moving fast, faster than anything in our databases. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. A cold dread began to settle in Zethka's stomach. In all the chaos of the four-way battle, he had almost forgotten about the human distress signal that had started this mess. The signals had been sent before the fighting began, which meant whoever was responding would be expecting to find a human colony under attack, not this chaotic free-for-all. He activated his command console and began reviewing what little intelligence they had gathered about human space. The mammals were a relatively recent addition to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only within the last century. Most galactic powers considered them to be a minor species, technologically inferior, politically fragmented, and militarily insignificant. But as Zethka studied the data, certain details began to stand out. Human expansion had been remarkably rapid for such a young species. They had established colonies throughout several star systems and had somehow managed to avoid major conflicts with the established powers. Their technology might be inferior in many ways, but they seemed to have a talent for adaptation and improvisation. More concerning were the scattered reports of human military actions. Few species had actually fought against human forces, but those that had reported some unusual characteristics. Humans seemed to favor smaller, more mobile units over the massive formations preferred by most galactic militaries. They also showed a disturbing tendency toward what other species considered excessive violence in combat situations. Sir, the other commanders are trying to establish communication again, his communications officer reported. This time, Zethka listened as the 3 alien commanders began to discuss the approaching contacts. It quickly became clear that none of them had expected human reinforcements to arrive so quickly. The Vorthak commander was dismissive, claiming that any human relief force would be easily crushed. The Crystalline Empire's hive mind was analyzing probability matrices, calculating the likely composition of human fleets. The Nexari commander seemed more concerned, noting that the approaching ships were moving in formations that suggested military rather than civilian vessels. Whatever's coming, we need to be ready, Zethka decided. All units, prepare defensive positions. If these humans want to fight, they'll get one. But even as he gave the orders, doubt gnawed at him. Something about this entire situation felt wrong. The human colony had been too well prepared. Their distress signal had reached the right people too quickly. And now, relief forces were arriving with suspicious speed. The battle around him continued to rage as the 3 alien armies hammered each other with increasing desperation. Plasma fire lit up the darkening sky as the local star began to set, casting the battlefield in shades of orange and red. The sounds of warfare echoed across the valley. The roar of Vorthak weapons, the chittering of crystalline warriors, the screech of Nexari dive attacks. In the human settlement, lights flickered behind hastily constructed barriers. The mammals were still alive, still waiting. But for what? As night fell across the alien battlefield, long-range sensors began to provide more detailed information about the approaching fleet. The ships were indeed human in design, but they were unlike anything in the standard databases. These vessels were sleek, angular, and bristling with weapon systems. More importantly, they were accompanied by support ships that suggested a major military operation rather than a simple rescue mission. "Commander," his sensor operator called out, voice tight with alarm, "the human ships are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're not responding to our standard diplomatic channels." Zethka slithered over to the communication station and listened to the transmission. The human voice was cold, professional, and utterly without emotion. "This is Admiral Sareth Chun of the Earth Defense Force 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. All hostile forces in the Kepler 442 system are advised that you have attacked a protected human colony. You have 30 minutes to withdraw from the system or face the consequences." The transmission repeated several times before cutting off, leaving an ominous silence on the communication channels. 30 minutes. Zethka looked around at the ongoing battle, at his trapped forces, at the impossible tactical situation they found themselves in. Withdrawal was not an option. None of the four armies had functional faster-than-light drives remaining after the devastating battle. They were all stuck here, committed to fighting it out to the bitter end. But, apparently, the humans had other plans. As the deadline approached, something changed in the atmosphere above the battlefield. The first sign was the Nexari swarm ships suddenly breaking off their attack runs and climbing rapidly toward the upper atmosphere. Their panicked cries filled the communication channels as their advanced sensors detected something that sent them fleeing. The second sign was a subtle shift in the electromagnetic spectrum that made all advanced scanning equipment begin to register anomalous readings. The very air seemed to hum with potential energy, as if reality itself was being charged with some kind of unknown force. The third sign was when the local star seemed to flicker. Every warrior on the battlefield, Hegemony, Vorthak, Crystalline, and Nexari, stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. The star wasn't actually flickering, they realized. Something was passing between the star and the planet. Something so large that it was creating eclipses with its shadow. "Impossible," whispered Captain Morthek. "Nothing can be that big." But as their sensors finally managed to penetrate the electromagnetic interference, the truth became clear. The human fleet had not just arrived in the system. They had positioned themselves between the planet and its star. And the ships were indeed massive beyond anything in galactic civilization. The lead vessel alone was larger than some space stations. Its hull was a dull gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its surface was covered with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Smaller ships, though still enormous by galactic standards, flanked it in perfect formation. Then, the humans began to broadcast again. But this time, it was not a diplomatic transmission. "All forces on Kepler, 442C, this is your final warning. You have 5 minutes to cease all hostilities and withdraw to minimum safe distance from the human settlement. Any weapons fire detected after the deadline will result in immediate military response." The voice was still calm, still professional. But now there was something else in it, something that made the primitive hindbrain of every warrior on the planet whisper warnings about apex predators. Zethka realized that his troops were looking to him for orders. Around the battlefield, he could see the other commanders facing the same moment of decision. The smart choice was obvious: stand down, withdraw, hope the humans would be satisfied with their compliance. But pride and military conditioning ran deep in all four species. The Vorthak commander was the first to make his choice. "No soft mammals will dictate terms to the Vorthak clans." Brutus roared over the communication channels. "All units, target the human settlement. If we cannot claim this world, no one can." The Crystalline Empire's hive mind reached the same conclusion through cold logic. Acceptable losses calculated. Priority: deny resources to competing species. Initiate sterilization protocol. The Nexari, despite their earlier retreat to high altitude, screeched their agreement. Skyhunters bout to no ground crawlers. Stormwing will cleanse this world. All eyes turned to Zethka. His forces were smaller than the others, having taken heavy casualties in the initial fighting. But they were still a significant military presence, and his decision would tip the balance of the final assault. The smart choice. The safe choice. Zethka looked at the human ships hanging in the sky like dark angels of death. Then he looked at his troops, his officers, the remnants of a proud military tradition that stretched back thousands of years. The hegemony bows to no one. He hissed into his communicator. All units, prepare for final assault on human positions. The deadline passed. For exactly 10 seconds, nothing happened. The 4 alien armies began their advance on the human settlement. Weapons charging, aircraft diving, ground forces moving in coordinated assault formations. Then the sky caught fire. The first thing Zethka noticed was that there was no sound. The human weapons fired in complete silence. Beams of energy so intense that they seemed to tear holes in reality itself. They struck with surgical precision, not randomly, not in wide-area bombardments, but with targeting accuracy that defied belief. Every single alien commander died in the first second of the bombardment. Not just the primary commanders, but their seconds in command, their tactical officers, their communication specialists. In one instant, for complex military organizations were decapitated with such precision that it suggested the humans had been monitoring their command structures throughout the entire battle. But the commanders were just the beginning. Zethka watched in horror as human weapons systematically dismantled the Vorthak firebase. Each heavy weapon was targeted individually, destroyed by energy beams that struck faster than his eyes could track. The bear-like aliens roared in confusion and rage as their tactical advantage evaporated in seconds. The Crystalline Empire's growth node lasted slightly longer, its organic structure attempting to regenerate damage as fast as it accumulated. But the human weapons adapted, shifting from energy beams to some kind of disintegration field that simply caused the alien structure to cease existing on a molecular level. The Nexari swarm ships in the upper atmosphere fared no better. Despite their speed and maneuverability, they were intercepted by human fighter craft that moved with impossible agility. The alien pilots, masters of aerial combat, found themselves outmatched by machines that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. And through it all, the human ground forces had not moved from their settlement. Zethkar realized he was still alive only because he had not been designated a command target. Around him, his troops were looking to him for orders, but what orders could he give? In less than a minute, the humans had effectively ended a battle that had been raging for 3 weeks. Then, he noticed that the human weapons had stopped firing. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the bombardment had been. Across the battlefield, scattered groups of alien warriors crouched in whatever cover they could find, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The night air was filled with the smell of ozone and burned metal. A new voice came over the communication channels. This one was different from the admiral who had given the warnings. Younger, with a slight accent that Zethka's translator couldn't identify. Attention, all surviving alien forces. This is Colonel Marcus Webb, commanding officer of the 15th Terror Shock Battalion. You are now prisoners of the Earth Defense Force. Any attempt to resist, escape, or harm human personnel will result in immediate termination. Drop all weapons and await further instructions. Zethka's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, then stopped as he realized the futility of the gesture. Around the battlefield, he could see movement as human soldiers finally emerged from their settlement. But these were not the farmers and colonists he had expected to find. These were soldiers, real soldiers, moving with the kind of professional competence that spoke of serious military training and combat experience. They wore armor that seemed to shift and change in the light, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. But it was not their equipment that sent a chill down Zethka's spine. It was the way they moved, the way they held themselves, the complete confidence in their posture. These were predators who had been waiting patiently for their prey to walk into the trap. As the human soldiers began to secure the battlefield, Zethka realized the full scope of what had happened. This had never been a random battle between four alien armies over a human colony. This had been a carefully orchestrated event, designed from the beginning to draw in multiple galactic powers and demonstrate something. The humans had used their own colony as bait. And now, as he dropped his weapon and raised his hands in surrender, Zethka understood that everything the galactic powers thought they knew about humanity was about to change. The age of underestimating the mammals was over. The holding pen was a simple force field barrier that created a transparent cage, roughly 50 meters square. Inside, representatives from 4 different alien species sat in uncomfortable silence, each group maintaining careful distance from the others, even in captivity. The irony was not lost on Commander Zethka that enemies who had been trying to kill each other hours ago were now united only by their shared status as prisoners. Colonel Marcus Webb stood outside the barrier, reviewing a tablet display with the casual confidence of someone completely in control of the situation. The human was smaller than any of the alien warriors, but there was something about his presence that made even the massive Vorthack survivors avoid direct eye contact. Perhaps it was the way the other human soldiers deferred to him, or the fact that his species had just demonstrated military capabilities that redefined galactic power structures. Comfortable accommodations, Webb said without looking up from his tablet. Much better than what you provided for human prisoners in the past. The Vorthack subcommander, the highest-ranking bear alien to survive the bombardment, growled low in his throat. We have taken no human prisoners. The clans do not waste resources on weaklings. Webb finally looked up, his brown eyes focusing on the alien with mild interest. Subcommander Kronos, isn't it? You're quite right. The Vorthack clans haven't taken human prisoners recently, but your forces have attacked 17 human merchant vessels in the last 2 years, killing every crew member. That's what we call murder in human law. The revelation sent a ripple of surprise through the holding pen. Zethka had not been aware that the bear aliens had been conducting raids against human shipping. Such activities usually remained local knowledge unless they escalated into formal diplomatic protests. How do you know this? Hissed the Crystalline Empire's surviving drone mind, designated 4429. Human intelligence networks are primitive. Flesh creatures lack the collective's information processing capabilities. Colonel Webb smiled, and there was nothing friendly about the expression. You'd be surprised what primitive intelligence networks can accomplish with proper motivation. We've been watching all of you for quite some time. He began to pace along the barrier, hands clasped behind his back in a gesture that reminded Zethka uncomfortably of military instructors delivering lectures to new recruits. The hegemony, Webb continued, pointing at Zethka's group. 12 unprovoked attacks on human colonies in the past 5 years. Your forces specialize in hitting agricultural worlds with minimal defenses. Efficient strategy from a military perspective. Zethka felt his tongue flick out involuntarily, a nervous gesture he had not displayed since his academy training. The human's casual knowledge of classified hegemony operations was deeply disturbing. Such information should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. The Crystalline Empire, Webb turned his attention to the insectoid aliens. Your expansion philosophy requires the elimination of all organic life forms and target systems. You've sterilized 3 worlds that had human settlements. Approximately 47,000 civilians. The drone mine's crystalline carapace flickered with agitated patterns of light. Resource allocation calculations justify all collective actions. Organic resistance impedes optimal development. And the Nexery, Webb looked toward the surviving bird aliens clustered in one corner of the pen. You prefer psychological warfare, broadcasting torture sessions of capture humans on open frequencies, targeting civilian shipping with the specific goal of terrorizing noncombatants. Talon Leader Scrix, the highest-ranking Nexery survivor, ruffled his feathers in what might have been defensive posturing. Fear is a tool of war. Skyhunters use all available weapons. Webb nodded as if the alien had just confirmed something important. Exactly. You all use different methods, but you share one common trait. You've all decided that humanity represents either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be exploited. What you haven't done is consider a third possibility. He stopped pacing and faced the imprisoned aliens directly. Though we might decide the same thing about you. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. In the distance, Zethka could see human military vehicles moving across the battlefield, collecting alien equipment, and establishing what appeared to be permanent installations. This was not the behavior of a rescue force preparing to evacuate colonists. This was an occupation force settling in for an extended stay. I don't understand, Subcommander Kronos finally growled. You caught us in a trap. You demonstrated superior firepower. But what is the purpose? If you wanted us dead, we would be dead. Webb's smile returned, and this time it was even less comforting than before. Dead enemies can't share information with their home governments. Living prisoners, on the other hand, can provide very detailed reports about human military capabilities. Zethka felt a chill run down his spine as the full scope of the human strategy became clear. This had not been about defending a colony or rescuing civilians. This had been a demonstration, a carefully orchestrated display of power designed to send a message to the major galactic governments. You want us to go home, he said slowly. You want us to tell our superiors exactly what we witnessed here. Very good, Commander, Webb nodded approvingly. Though I should clarify, you won't be going home immediately. First, you're going to help us with a little project. The Colonel activated his tablet and gestured toward the holding pen's barrier. The force field shimmered and became opaque, then shifted to display images that made all four groups of aliens lean forward in shock. The images showed space battles, massive fleets of unknown ships engaging vessels that belonged to various galactic powers. But the unknown ships were clearly human in design, sharing the same angular aesthetics and dark hull coloring as the fleet orbiting overhead. These images were recorded over the past 6 months, Webb explained. Human expeditionary forces have been engaging alien military units throughout this sector of the galaxy. The results have been decisive. The next image showed a hegemony fleet in complete disarray, their signature serpentine vessels torn apart by weapons fire. Zethka recognized the formation. It was Admiral Essie Kinnor's 5th Assault Wing, one of the most elite units in the hegemony navy. The 5th Assault Wing was reported as lost to navigation failure, he whispered. Navigation failure, Webb repeated with amusement. I suppose that's one way to describe it. They navigated into human space and attempted to establish a forward base. We helped them navigate to the afterlife. More images followed. Vorthak fortress ships reduced to scrap metal, crystalline empire growth fleets dissolving under concentrated fire, Nexuary swarm formations scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Each image represented what should have been a major military disaster, but which had been reported as accidents, equipment failures, or unexplained disappearances. The point is, Webb continued, this demonstration on Kepler 442c is not an isolated incident. This is humanity announcing our presence on the galactic stage. We're done being the quiet newcomers who try not to bother the established powers. Drone Mind 4429's carapace flickered rapidly as it processed the implications. Collective analysis indicates human military expansion exceeds all predictive models. Previous intelligence assessments require complete revision. That's exactly what we want to hear, Webb said. Because when you return to your respective governments, you're going to recommend immediate cessation of all hostile activities against human interests. Not because we're asking politely, but because you now understand the consequences of continued aggression. Subcommander Kronos stood slowly, his massive frame dwarfing the human colonel despite the barrier between them. The Vorthak clans do not bow to threats. We understand only strength, and strength must be proven in single combat. I challenge your strongest warrior. Webb considered this for a moment, then shrugged. Acceptable. Sergeant Harrison. A human soldier approached the barrier. She was even smaller than the colonel, barely reaching the shoulder height of the shortest alien in the pen. Her armor was standard military issue, and she carried no visible weapons except for a combat knife at her belt. Sergeant, Subcommander Kronos would like to test human strength in single combat. Are you available? The woman's face was hidden behind her helmet's visor, but her voice carried the same professional calm that seemed to characterize all human military personnel. Yes, sir. Standard rules or alien preferences? Let's accommodate our guest. Vorthack combat rules. No ranged weapons. Fight continues until one combatant yields or is incapacitated. The force field barrier shimmered and created a small opening large enough for the human sergeant to step through. The other aliens instinctively moved back, giving the combatants space in the center of the pen. Zethka had seen Vorthack warriors fight before. They were natural predators, evolved from bear-like creatures on a high-gravity world. Subcommander Kronos stood nearly 3 meters tall and massed at least 4 times what the human woman weighed. His claws were natural weapons capable of shredding most forms of body armor, and his species' muscle density allowed them to crush bones with casual swipes of their massive arms. The fight should have been over in seconds. Instead, Sergeant Harrison moved like flowing water around the Vorthack's initial charge. Her small size became an advantage as she slipped under his claws and struck at pressure points with surgical precision. When Kronos tried to grapple with her, she used his own momentum against him, employing techniques that turned his greater mass into a liability. The other aliens watched in fascination as the human woman systematically dismantled one of the galaxy's most feared warrior species. She was not stronger than the Vorthack. No human could match their raw physical power. But she was faster, smarter, and infinitely more skilled. When Subcommander Kronos finally collapsed, gasping for breath, and unable to continue fighting, Sergeant Harrison had not even removed her knife from its sheath. Adequate demonstration, Sergeant, Colonel Webb said calmly. Return to your duties. The woman saluted and exited the pen, leaving the aliens to stare at the defeated Vorthack warrior. Kronos slowly pulled himself into a sitting position, his pride clearly more damaged than his body. Impossible, he wheezed. Vorthack are the apex predators of our world. We have conquered 17 star systems through strength of claw and fang. Webb nodded sympathetically. And that's exactly why you lost. You're apex predators from one world. Humans are apex predators from a world that specializes in creating apex predators. Our entire evolutionary history is one long story of survival against impossible odds. He reactivated his tablet and displayed a new series of images, this time showing Earth's natural environment. The aliens saw vast predators that dwarfed anything on their own worlds, extreme weather patterns that would devastate most civilizations, and ecological systems so competitive that survival required constant adaptation and innovation. Earth doesn't just have one apex predator, Webb explained. It has dozens, and they all compete with each other in an environment that kills anything not strong enough to survive. Humans didn't just evolve to fight other humans. We evolved to fight everything. Talon leader Scrix's feathers rustled nervously. Sky hunters have observed many worlds. Few species survive such hostile environments. Most don't, Webb agreed. Most species evolve on worlds where they become the dominant life form relatively early in their development. They get comfortable. They specialize for their specific environment. Humans never got that luxury. More images flashed across the display. Primitive humans hunting massive predators with crude weapons, civilizations rising and falling through warfare and competition, technological development driven by the constant need to overcome environmental and biological challenges. By the time we developed space travel, Webb continued, we had already spent millions of years learning to overcome superior physical strength through superior tactics, technology, and teamwork. Fighting alien species is just another day at the office. Zethkov found himself studying the human kernel with new understanding. The casual confidence, the lack of fear when facing aliens who could physically overpower him. It was not arrogance. It was the quiet assurance of a predator who had never encountered prey that posed a real threat. But why reveal this now, he asked. Your species has been in contact with galactic civilization for decades. Why not demonstrate your true capabilities earlier? Webb's expression grew serious. Because we hoped it wouldn't be necessary. Humans prefer cooperation to conflict when possible. We tried diplomacy, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. We wanted to find our place in galactic society through peaceful means. The images on the display shifted to show human diplomatic missions, trade convoys, and colonization efforts. Many of the scenes showed humans working alongside other species in apparent harmony. But some of you interpreted our peaceful intentions as weakness. You began testing our resolve with small attacks, thinking we would retreat or negotiate from a position of weakness. You were wrong. The final image showed the current tactical situation. Human fleets positioned throughout the sector, advanced monitoring stations tracking alien fleet movements, and military installations established on dozens of previously unexplored worlds. This is the new reality, Webb announced. Humanity is no longer a minor species seeking acceptance from established powers. We are now a major galactic force, and we will defend our interests with the same determination that allowed us to survive on one of the most hostile worlds in the galaxy. He deactivated the display and looked directly at each group of aliens in turn. Your governments have a choice to make. They can recognize human territorial claims and cease all hostile activities against our people, or they could discover exactly how effective human military technology can be when applied without restraint. DroneMind 4429's carapace flickered with rapid calculation patterns. Collective requires additional data before strategic decisions. What are human territorial demands? Reasonable ones, Webb replied. Recognition of existing human colonies and trade routes. Reparations for previous attacks on human civilian populations, and formal treaties establishing protocols for future interaction between our species. Subcommander Kronos struggled to his feet, wincing from his defeat. And if our governments refuse these terms? Webb's smile returned, cold and predatory. Then you'll find out why Earth produces such effective apex predators. And unlike this demonstration, the next one won't end with prisoners being taken. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. These aliens had just witnessed a carefully controlled demonstration of human military capability. They had seen their most elite warriors defeated, their advanced technology rendered obsolete, and their strategic assumptions proven completely wrong. But they had been allowed to live. The message was clear. This had been humanity showing restraint. The alternative would be considerably less pleasant. As night fell across the alien landscape, Zethkov found himself contemplating the broader implications of what he had witnessed. The galactic balance of power was about to shift dramatically. Species that had dominated their regions of space for thousands of years would now have to acknowledge that the small mammals from the third planet of an unremarkable star system were no longer seeking their approval. Humanity had graduated from prey to predator. And like all successful predators, they had learned to hunt in packs. The transport ship Diplomatic Necessity was nothing like the warships that had dominated the battlefield at Kepler 442c. Its hull was clean white metal decorated with symbols from a dozen different species, and its design prioritized comfort over combat capability. But Commander Zethkov was not fooled by appearances. The vessel's escort consisted of 6 human destroyers whose sleek profiles promised swift death to any ship foolish enough to threaten diplomatic personnel. He stood at the observation window in his assigned quarters, watching the stars will slowly pass as the ship made its way toward hegemony space. 3 weeks had passed since their capture, 3 weeks of careful debriefings, and what the humans euphemistically called cultural exchange sessions. In reality, they had been detailed interrogations designed to extract every piece of tactical and strategic information the prisoners possessed. What disturbed Zethka most was not that the humans had been so thorough, but that they had been so professional about it. There had been no torture, no threats, no attempts at psychological manipulation. Instead, human intelligence officers had simply asked questions and cross-referenced answers until they had constructed detailed profiles of alien military capabilities, political structures, and strategic planning methods. The humans had treated the entire process like an academic exercise. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting entry to his quarters. Zethka turned from the window to see Colonel Webb entering, carrying a data tablet and wearing an expression of polite courtesy that had become familiar over the past 3 weeks. "Commander, I hope you found the accommodations adequate for your species requirements." "Quite adequate, Colonel," Zethka replied, settling into the specially designed furniture that accommodated his serpentine physiology. "Though I confess myself curious about our destination. Your crew has been notably vague about our travel itinerary." Webb smiled and took a seat across from him. "Direct route to the hegemony capital system. We'll be arriving tomorrow, at which point you and your surviving officers will be transferred to hegemony custody along with formal diplomatic communications from the Earth government. And the other prisoners? Similar arrangements. Subcommander Kronos and his people are being delivered to the Vorthak clans. The Crystalline Empire will receive their drone mind along with detailed technical specifications for human defensive capabilities. The Nexari are getting their Talon leader back, plus comprehensive documentation of human fleet movements throughout their territory." Zethka's tongue flicked out thoughtfully. "You're returning us all simultaneously. Coordinated diplomatic contact with 4 major galactic powers at once. Efficiency is important when delivering ultimatums," Webb agreed. "We want all your governments to receive the same message at the same time, so there's no confusion about humanity's position or intentions." The colonel activated his tablet and displayed a star chart showing the local galactic region. Red zones indicated areas of recent human military activity, while blue zones showed established alien territories. The overlap between the two categories was extensive and growing. "Your superiors are going to ask you for recommendations about how to respond to human demands," Webb continued. "I thought you might appreciate some additional context before you file your report." New data appeared on the chart, detailed intelligence about human fleet deployments, technological capabilities, and strategic objectives. The scope of information was staggering, representing the kind of military intelligence that wars were fought to obtain. "Why are you showing me this?" Zethka asked. "Surely such information is classified at the highest levels." "Because we want you to understand exactly what your government would be facing if they choose military confrontation over diplomatic negotiation," Webb replied. "This is not a bluff or a psychological operation. This is us providing your leadership with the data they need to make informed decisions." Zethka studied the information with growing unease. Human fleet strength was at least triple what his government's intelligence services had estimated. Their technological capabilities included weapon systems that had no equivalent in any alien arsenal. Most concerning of all, their strategic positioning suggested that they had been preparing for large-scale military operations for years, not months. "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Officially? Human strategic policy regarding alien contact has been evolving since our first diplomatic missions. Unofficially, Webb's expression became more serious. We've been watching you all since the moment we achieved faster-than-light travel. Every diplomatic contact, every trade agreement, every cultural exchange has been an intelligence-gathering operation. Even the colonies you allowed us to attack. Especially those. Nothing provides better intelligence about enemy capabilities than observing them in combat. Every raid on human settlements has taught us something valuable about alien tactics, technology, and strategic thinking. The implications were staggering. Every human loss, every destroyed colony, every civilian death had been part of a larger intelligence operation designed to assess alien military capabilities. The humans had been using their own people as bait to gather the information they needed to plan effective countermeasures. That's a rather cold approach to your own population, Zethka observed. Webb nodded grimly. Welcome to human military philosophy. We call it acceptable losses in service of strategic objectives. Every human who died in those attacks was a volunteer who understood the risks and chose to serve anyway. Our colonies weren't just agricultural settlements. They were forward observation posts staffed by military personnel posing as civilians, including Kepler 442c, especially Kepler 442c. That colony was established specifically to serve as bait for exactly the kind of multi-species engagement we ended up with. We needed to test our capabilities against multiple alien military doctrines simultaneously. Zethka leaned back in his chair, processing the full scope of human strategic thinking. They had not just defeated 4 alien armies through superior firepower. They had manipulated those armies into attacking at a location of their choosing, at a time of their choosing, under circumstances that maximized human tactical advantages. Your species has a talent for long-term planning, he admitted. Survival trait from our home world, Webb explained. Earth's environment changes constantly. Climate shifts, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, ice ages. Species that couldn't plan ahead went extinct. Humans learned to think in terms of decades and centuries, not just immediate tactical situations. The Colonel brought up another display, this one showing detailed analysis of the 4 alien species' military capabilities. Each species' strengths and weaknesses were documented with clinical precision, along with recommended countermeasures and strategic approaches for future conflicts. The hegemony relies on overwhelming firepower and superior numbers, Webb read from the analysis. Effective when facing technologically inferior opponents, but vulnerable to precision strikes against command and control systems. Recommend targeting leadership hierarchy and communication networks in future engagements. Zethka felt his blood run cold as he listened to the human assessment of his species' military weaknesses. Every detail was accurate, every recommendation sound. If the hegemony chose to fight rather than negotiate, this analysis would give human forces decisive tactical advantages. The Vorthat clans emphasize individual combat prowess and honor-based military traditions, Webb continued. Predictable tactical responses based on cultural conditioning. Effective when facing opponents who share similar combat philosophies, but vulnerable to unconventional strategies that exploit their inflexibility. The Crystalline Empire operates through collective intelligence and organic technology. Excellent coordination and adaptive capabilities, but dependent on central command nodes for higher-level strategic decisions. Disruption of hive mind communications causes immediate tactical degradation. The Nexari prefer mobility and psychological warfare, superior speed and agility in combat situations, but limited endurance for extended engagements. Vulnerable to defensive strategies that force prolonged combat without decisive results. Each analysis was followed by detailed tactical recommendations, strategic countermeasures, and technological solutions specifically designed to neutralize alien advantages. The humans had not just studied their enemies. They had engineered comprehensive solutions for defeating them. This level of analysis requires extensive observation, Zethka said. How long have you been watching us? Webb closed the tactical display and activated a new one showing human intelligence operations throughout the galaxy. The map revealed a network of monitoring stations, undercover operatives, and data collection systems that span dozens of star systems. Human intelligence services have been operating in alien space since our first diplomatic contacts, he explained. Every embassy, every trade mission, every cultural exchange program has included intelligence personnel gathering information about alien capabilities, intentions, and weaknesses. Your diplomats were spies. Our diplomats were diplomats. But yes, they were also intelligence assets, as were our traders, our scientists, our cultural attaches, and our civilian contractors. Human intelligence doctrine emphasizes redundancy and comprehensive coverage. Zethkar studied the intelligence network with professional admiration despite his discomfort at being its target. The scope and sophistication of human operations far exceeded anything his own government had suspected. They had been operating under the assumption that humans were new to galactic civilization and therefore naive about intelligence work. Another fundamental miscalculation. What happens now, he asked. You've demonstrated superior military capabilities and revealed the extent of your intelligence operations. Surely you don't expect our governments to simply capitulate to human demands. Webb's expression became thoughtful. We expect your governments to make rational decisions based on accurate information. Some will choose cooperation and benefit from peaceful coexistence with humanity. Others will choose confrontation and discover why Earth produces such effective predators. And if all four species unite against the human threat, then we'll have the large-scale conflict we've been preparing for since we first encountered alien civilization. It won't be pleasant for anyone involved, but it will be decisive. The Colonel activated a final display showing projected casualty figures for various conflict scenarios. The numbers were staggering, billions of deaths across multiple star systems, entire civilizations reduced to scattered survivors, economic and technological regression that would set galactic development back centuries. But it won't come to that, Webb continued, because your governments aren't stupid. They'll look at the tactical analysis we're providing, assess their chances of victory in a direct military confrontation, and choose negotiation over annihilation. You seem very confident in that prediction. Human intelligence services have constructed detailed psychological profiles of alien leadership structures. We know how your governments make strategic decisions, what factors influence their choices, and what arguments will be most persuasive when you deliver your reports. Webb stood and deactivated his tablet, preparing to leave. Commander, you've been chosen to return home not because you were the highest-ranking survivor, but because our psychological analysis indicates you're the most likely to present accurate information to your superiors without allowing pride or cultural bias to distort the facts. And if my government chooses to ignore my recommendations, then you'll have done your duty as both a military officer and a rational being. What your superiors do with accurate intelligence is their choice to make. The human colonel moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at Zethkar. For what it's worth, Commander, I hope they make the smart choice. Humans prefer cooperation to conquest when possible. We'd rather have trading partners than conquest victims. But you're prepared for either possibility. We're prepared for every possibility we can imagine, and quite a few we hope never to encounter. That's what kept us alive on Earth, and it's what will keep us alive in the galaxy. After Webb left, Zethkar returned to the observation window and contemplated the stars. Somewhere among those points of light lay the hegemony capital, where his government would soon be forced to confront a new reality. Humanity was no longer the minor species seeking acceptance from established powers. They were now a major galactic force with the capability and willingness to back their diplomatic positions with overwhelming military power. The age of human deference to alien authority was over. What came next would depend on how quickly the established powers could adapt to a galaxy where the smallest predators had proven to be the most dangerous. In the distance, one of the escort destroyers adjusted its position, weapons systems gleaming in the starlight. The ship's hull bore no decorative elements, no cultural symbols, no artistic flourishes. It was a pure expression of function over form, designed for one purpose and optimized to excel at that purpose. It was, Zethkar realized, a perfect reflection of humanity itself, a species that had evolved in an environment where survival required constant adaptation, innovation, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to prevail against impossible odds. The galaxy was about to learn what Earth had already taught, that the most successful predators were not always the largest or strongest, but the ones smart enough to turn every disadvantage into an advantage and every challenge into an opportunity. As the diplomatic necessity continued its journey toward hegemony space, Zethka began composing his report. His government would not like what he had to tell them, but they needed to understand the choice they faced: adapt to humanity's presence in galactic civilization, or discover why Earth had produced the most successful apex predator the galaxy had ever seen. The decision was theirs to make, but the consequences would be shared by every sentient species among the stars. The humans had spoken. Now it was time for the galaxy to listen.